It's truly a sad story, abominable even. But there's just one tiny hiccup with the mushroom's message to Douglas. Hello my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance, it's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is First Nations Exceptionalism and the strange case of 215 Indigenous bodies. One of the tropes we often hear today is that First Nations peoples have a unique gift for navigating psychedelic spaces. And I have no doubt that that's true. But lately what I've been hearing is that all First Nations peoples, regardless of any training or talent, share this gift. You see, the claim is that since some First Nations peoples in the past, and let me be clear, we're talking about a tiny minority of people, but nonetheless, some First Nations peoples in the past used plant medicines, that somehow their usage bestows an ability, a remarkable ability, on all First Nations peoples living today. Such a perspective was articulated by a young woman during the protest of Rick Doblin at the Psychedelic Sciences 2023 conference when she said,
"We need to let the Indigenous lead."
Now, despite the fact that that young lady has been involved in psychedelia for 5 minutes, and Rick Doblin has been involved in psychedelia for over 30 years, she still gets to tell Rick Doblin what's up. To be clear from the outset, this is not an attack on First Nations peoples or their techniques, of which I have personally been a beneficiary. I've done peyote, I've sat with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is probably my favorite sacrament, ever. So I'm not shitting on the techniques or the medicines themselves. Far from it. I have witnessed ayahuasquetas perform feats that defy every law of science of which we are aware. I stand in humility and awe of their remarkable abilities. But does that mean that because some First Nations peoples have this ability, that all First Nations peoples today are recipients of this heritage? That is the question I will try to answer in this video. But first, if you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment to let me know how I can improve. Also, it'd be great to link up on Instagram. Find me at Psychedelic Historian. With that out of the way, let's dig into this one. At the 2022 Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Indigenous speaker and activist Francine Douglas took the stage. Douglas is a member of the Stolo peoples who occupy the southern part of Western Canada. Douglas is also a member of Sacred Circle, which is an Indigenous health and wellness organization. I like that groups like Sacred Circle exist, and I applaud Francine Douglas for her work in those areas. The truth is, the Canadian government has been absolutely horrible to First Nations peoples, every bit as much as the American government has been. So Francine Douglas and I are in complete agreement about that. It's in the nuance where we part company. Here's what I mean. While on stage at the conference, Douglas told the story of
the 215 Indigenous children were unearthed in unmarked graves at the Kamloops Residential School in Kamloops, Secwepemc,
known as the Kamloops Indian Residential School. The subplot is that these children were either abused to death or murdered in some other way, and then callously thrown in a common grave by the staff beneath the campus. Douglas goes on to reveal,
I had my first medicine journey with Sacred Circle about a week after the announcement of the 215 children in Kamloops, Secwepemc.
The mushroom she consumed on that journey told her that,
It also told me the children found in Kamloops, Secwepemc have been waiting for their families to find their connection, to find their strength on the land and in ceremony, language, song, and dance. Waiting for you, our allies, our neighbors, our friends, our community, to be ready to witness our pain.
It's truly a sad story, abominable even. But there's just one tiny hiccup with the mushroom's message to Douglas. There are no children buried under Kamloops Indian Residential School. Not one. It all started when an anthropologist at the University of Fraser Valley, Sarah Bollier, decided to use ground-penetrating radar around the campus to see if she could find these rumored long-lost bodies. She was the first to claim that 215 Indigenous corpses of children had actually been found. This ignited a firestorm of protest. All across Canada, churches, many of them built by First Nations peoples, were burned to the ground. The Canadian government quickly allocated $27 million in efforts of discovering who these children were and transporting their remains back to their families. The press pounced on this narrative, with one story after the next claiming that actual bodies had been found beneath the school. But as the story heated up, Bollier began to walk back her claims about finding actual bodies. Now, she said, the ground-penetrating radar showed that they were probable burials. She then walked back her claims even further, claiming to have barely scratched the surface and finding only disturbances in the ground, such as tree roots, metal, and stones. So, no bodies. On Dr. Bollier's faculty page for the University of Fraser Valley, we see that while she might spend her time looking for these mass Indigenous grave sites, she's never found any to date. There is a sad irony to it all. Kamloops sits on Indigenous territory and was actually founded by an Indigenous elder, Shuswap Chief Louis Klexlikin. Furthermore, the school is a mere stone's throw away from the Kamloops Reserve Cemetery. Are we to believe that Indigenous schoolmasters murdered Indigenous children and then buried them under an Indigenous school when there is an Indigenous graveyard not far away? All of this raises questions about First Nations exceptionalism and the mushroom journey Francine Douglas took a week before this bogus story hit the press. If the mushroom voice truly came from some outside ethereal realm, well, how did it not know that all the news stories were mistaken? Where is Francine Douglas's First Nations exceptionalism? Why are we to let her lead?
We need to let the Indigenous lead.
If she makes such erroneous and, quite frankly, divisive claims. For those who believe that psychedelic experiences are also subject to material reductionism, well, I mean, this seems to kind of count as a point in their favor, right? In this case, the message Douglas received was not from out there, but very much generated in her own mind. Though, we might entertain another possibility. I mean, sure, the voices Douglas heard were definitely not from some outside ethereal realm, but very much generated by herself. But does that mean that all of the voices and messages and entities that we meet in those psychedelic spaces are just being made up by us? Oaxacan curandera, Maria Sabina, would claim otherwise. For Maria Sabina, not all people were worthy of the mushroom secrets. Those who were worthy, such as herself, could enter what she called the world where everything is known, where she could sample the divine nectar of wisdom that would cut across culture, space, and time. Others, like Maria Sabina's own sister, Anna Maria, could not enter that sacred space. Despite the fact that she ate mushrooms, the true voice of the mushrooms simply wouldn't talk to her. And that's not me saying it. That's according to Maria Sabina herself. So perhaps these spaces are real and the entities encountered in those spaces are real as well, and Douglas just doesn't know how to access them yet. Perhaps it takes slightly more training than simply citing an Indigenous status. At the time of making this video, no bodies have been found under Kamloops, despite Francine Douglas saying that they had in fact been unearthed. Every spiritual psychonaut must ask herself if the mushrooms were wrong, or if Francine Douglas was wrong. Or, as an atheist might contend, the mushrooms were wrong because Francine Douglas was wrong. Can Douglas really enter the world where everything is known, like Maria Sabina, based on nothing more than her indigeneity? Or is she barred from admission, like Anna Maria, who is likewise Indigenous? Simply claiming First Nations heritage as a reason a person has an exceptional relationship with plant medicines, I mean, it gets us absolutely nowhere. While we're on the subject, how is it that all of the pain and suffering when we hear stories like this are always placed squarely on the shoulders of Westerners? Now, I'm not excusing the horrible things that Westerners have done in the past, they absolutely did. But the truth is that all people in all places in all times have done horrible things to other people, and that very much includes First Nations peoples. For example, the Stolo, Francine Douglas's own community, was a slave-driving peoples. And so I find myself needing to ask this question. Does the pain Francine Douglas feels by having her culture erased by the So this is weird. So the Canadian government did get rid of the Stolo culture. I mean, they made it illegal, but they also reinstated it before Francine Douglas was even born. Not that that excuses any of it. That was a total dick move, Canada. Anyway, does the pain Francine Douglas feels by having her culture almost erased by the Canadian government recognized the pain that her own people, the Stolo, caused other people by erasing their cultures through enslavement? Look, that's not an easy question. But perhaps misreporting facts and citing only one's indigenous status or mushrooms as a source for the claim is not the best way to answer it. We need to come together as a unified psychedelic renaissance and finally admit that all of our ancestors, whether Western, African, Asian, or wherever, it doesn't matter, all of them have done things that we today would find absolutely deplorable. So maybe we can use Francine Douglas's mistake as a lesson to be a little friendlier to each other and not pretend that First Nations peoples have some kind of monopoly on psychedelic knowledge that Western people simply don't possess. Perhaps the lesson here is this: that, sure, obviously playing the victim will get you preferential treatment, it'll get you a lot of sympathy, and it'll get you speaking spots at conferences. Fair enough. However, actually knowing what you're talking about just might better serve not only yourself, but your community at large. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and I'd love to thank you for stopping by. If you found value in this content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and let me know how I can make the channel better. Also, it'd be great to see you on Instagram. Again, that's @PsychedelicHistorian. And until we meet again, I'm Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace!